So today what we're going to be talking about a little bit is we're going to go over drop control, go over what we do in case there's anybody new here who hasn't heard of what WiseConn does and they're new to WiseConn. The other half of our webinar is going to be all about SWIIM. So SWIIM system is going to come in. We have Kevin France today, the CEO for SWIIM. He's going to come in and do a presentation about their company as well as our recent integration. This series is part of a few different episodes that we're going to have. It's a full integrator series. We're going to talk about different companies, how we work with them using either hardware, software, with their APIs, stuff like that. So I'll go ahead and I'll share my screen and we will get going here. And if at any time you have any questions, there's a Q&A right at the bottom of your screens. There's also a chat. You can send chats directly to me. If there's any problem with my screen sharing, with my voice or audio, just let me know in the Q&A and we can go ahead and stop and fix that for you. All right, so here's a little presentation about drop control. So background on WiseConn, we were founded in 2006. We've been in California since 2015. We're a Chilean-based company with over 200,000 acres and over 8,000 nodes deployed. So the 200,000 acres, that's where we have all of our equipment through. The 8,000 nodes, it's all of our little hardware units that we have out in the field. In California alone, we have 15 distributors, but in the United States, we're growing over 20 now. We've got places in California, in the Pacific Northwest, in the Southeast region, Midwest. Those are just some few places in the United States. In 5 different countries, we have over 2,000 users, and that's Argentina, Chile, the United States, Peru, and Mexico. We have both our support and warehouse in Fresno as well as Chile, so we have 2 different places where we've got a full staff support team and a full staffed warehouse. And we have an open API, so that's kind of what we're going to focus in this series, is about our API. Today we're going to be talking about SWIIM. So drop control, what it is, it's a reliable irrigation monitoring and control system. So we pride ourselves on being, forefront in the automation industry. Irrigation automation is our bread and butter. Along with that though, we do a lot of different telemetry aspects. So first off, we can do like pump start and stop. We can do the wireless valve control, so open and closing valves, sequential valve operations, per variety irrigation. We'd also do stuff with weather stations. So we actually distribute ourselves Davis weather stations, and we can either do that and read them through their hardware, or we can read the Davis weather station through an open API. So if you have a Davis weather station, either adding on WiseConn technology or using our API, you have a couple different ways to get the data onto our drop control platform. Here we have a soil moisture probe in the field. So we do sell Suntech sensors, but we are sensor agnostic. So any open protocol sensor in the field, we can tie into and read it. And then we really do pride ourselves on the remote capabilities. So all from your phone, from the iPad, from the desktop, wherever you are in the office or at home, you can remotely get onto drop control either with an app or through any web browser. It takes no installation of a web browser or any software. You can be scheduling your irrigations, view your soil moistures, print out your accumulated volumes after a growing season to report water, all that good stuff. So we're comprised of our hardware and our software. We'll go in a little bit about our hardware here. The X1 is the monitoring and control node, so it's the node in the middle. That's our flagship node. So from the start, that's been the node that can do all of the control capabilities as well as all of the monitoring capabilities. So starting, stopping a pump, opening and closing a valve. It can do all that while on the same node. It can be reading a weather station, reading a soil moisture probe, a pressure transducer, a pressure switch, dendrometer, a lot of different things that you can think of. Next, we have our M1. So that's a sole data logger. It's very competitive pricing that we put it out on the market, just because it's a sole monitoring unit that can do, soil probes, weather stations, It can either be its own radio unit. So drop control uses a 900 megahertz radio frequency that all the nodes talk to each other on to bounce back information that then go to the cloud. But the M1 can either be a cellular gateway of itself, or it can be a radio module in the field with a gateway for the X1 or the C1. That brings us to our C1, the full fertigation controlling node and the pump station controller. So it can control just off one node, 5 different pumps, 10 different valves. So if you have, a couple different regular pumps, centrifugal pumps with some chem pumps, FERT pumps, acid injection, we do all of it. We get into our software. So kind of how it works, like I was talking about before, you'll go onto your app or onto the desktop. You will schedule your irrigations. They'll go through Amazon Web Services to the WiseConn server for drop control. Then that'll all be put onto the gateway. And from there, the gateway is going to send out all the commands to the radio nodes in the field. It's also able to be done through a third-party platform. So like through other companies, you can schedule irrigations, and then we on our end, we do the execution part. So our hardware takes care of executing the irrigation commands in the field, or we can pull and plug data. So we're reading a soil probe in the drop control, another using an API, another company can take in the data that they're getting. And SWIIM's case, any accumulated volumes that we're getting through the flow meter or any other sensor we have on a reservoir in the canal, any other water source that we can measure and put a node on it, they can pull in the data that we're getting in from our nodes. Here's a little snapshot of the web page. It's kind of the basic overview of drop control. That's what growers will see when they log in. They're able to see all of their nodes in the field, as well as all of the locations of the different blocks. So using Google Earth, we make a KMZ file for them, and we kind of pinpoint every location of where each node is so that they can track not only where it is in the field, but the battery percentage, the radio frequency, to make sure they can see if anything's going on in the field that's wrong. They can also see what's irrigating, where's my soil moisture at, what's the weather like, all from this one dashboard. We really pride ourselves on having the easy to schedule, so that whole automation is our bread and butter. Easy to schedule. So they have 3 different ways they can do it: by end date and time, by the volume, you need to put a quarter inch of water out, or by duration, which is probably the most common one. If you need a 24-hour set, a 48-hour set, it's all customizable to the grower. So if they know their correct, flow meter by the acreage, drop control does a calculation, and we can actually get the irrigation down to the inches. It'll also tell you how many inches you're going to be irrigating if you go off of a duration or of an end date and time. And as I was talking about with the fertilizer earlier, with the C1, we can control fertilizer pumps. We can also control acid injectors. So you can irrigate to a pH set point. You can add multiple fertigations within one irrigation, start the pump and control it proportionally, so per every 1,000 gallons, or if you need to control it and just put a batch out, you can batch it, it's no problem. The duration, date, time, volume. We also have templates and programs. So the template is what's going to be happening throughout the day for your irrigations, while the program is setting that template for as long as you want. So if you want 4 different irrigations to happen within one day, and you can set that to happen, for 2 weeks. You set it and let it go. The day before it's going to end, it gives you a notification. You can also customize it to however you want. So if you want it to irrigate, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and just skip one day and have that keep repeating, it'll do that as well. Here's the daily view. So from midnight all the way to 11:59, we have all our stuff in military time. We can view it on a Gantt chart. So it has specific details of what time it's going to start. You can see the fertilizer injection there. And you can also see the blue bars are going to be what was scheduled. The green bars is what actually happened. For this case, they're green because it had a fertilizer injection. If it was regular with no fertilizer or acid injection, it would be blue as well. Here's a weekly view. So what a lot of our growers can do, they come in and they'll say, on Monday I have a set schedule. They can click the scheduled irrigation button over here, print out a PDF format, and it's going to give you the next 7 days in a row of what's going to be happening, which pumps are turning on, which boosters are turning on, what blocks are going to be irrigating for how long. And it gives all of that information to the irrigator so that they can either just post it up in the shop, do what they need to do, and keep track of what's going on. So getting more into the API side of things, this is where from other platforms, growers can schedule their irrigations, come in here, see it on a Gantt chart, and just do a mass confirm all or confirm some of them. So they're going to be highlighted in yellow, and we do have a legend at the bottom for everything. So whether that's a fertilizer injection, regular irrigation, manual irrigation, that just kind of means basing it off of a pressure switch. So the key points for this is bidirectional. We can throw data their way, they can throw data our way, same with execution. We're kind of closing the loop with the irrigation execution. So the grower gets the recommendation, they plan out the schedule, send it to drop control, and we close the loop. Lastly, this is not our first rodeo, so we've got 7 different API integrations. And this week we are focusing more on the water management side of things with SWIIM and reporting and how you can better manage your water. The first step to that, I guess, on our end would be we can look at an operational feedback. So what actually happened in the field, you can schedule an irrigation, you're pretty sure this is your GPM or GPH, and you're pretty sure this is what your pressures are at. Well, our sensors are going to actually tell you what's going on. So the scheduled flow, that was 1,200 gallons per minute, looking at around 1,100, so not too far off. It gives you a flow difference. Same thing with pressures, it can do that as well. So if you think you're supposed to have 40 psi, for some reason you've got 30 psi, it might relate to either a pump issue or other hydraulic issues in the field that you can address. Here's where we get into the flow readings. So we can do like accumulated volumes for growers, looking at the flow, basically tracking that volume throughout the season or any custom date range. And SWIIM will do that, but go way more in depth on your water reporting and kind of give you a more accurate view and a more simplified view of where your water's going, how much it's costing you. That's another big thing, is they factor in the cost of that water. Then we've got our mobile apps. So everything that you can do on the desktop, we're trying to make that as easy of a transition as possible into our mobile app. So the newest version that just came out, we've got guys that are 60 years old and older that are using the app every day to schedule irrigations or track their soil moisture. There's a couple little more screenshots. So the same thing with the desktop, you can see the front page of the map. You can see the soil analysis, the farm, everything that's going on. And then the ROI, so the yield increase, we saw in one case on almonds in Madeira was 5 to 10% in yield increase, even with the loss of a well. So this guy lost a well for the entire summer. If you check out our YouTube page, Tom Rogers is all over there, and the water savings was still within 30%. This is just a picture of the other integrations that we've got. So like I said, not our first rodeo. We've been around it before, and I think that, incorporating people like SWIIM is really making it easier to solve the growers' issues of like, how long do I need to irrigate and where's my water going? So that involves, the client, the grower, the integrator, and then we don't technically work grower direct, but our distributors work with the growers directly, or it can be just us and the integrator just working back and forth together to give the right data that the grower wants. A little bit about our reporting. So we can do a report based on the zone. So we come into the irrigation tab, we look at, I want an irrigation report for just this block of peaches or just this block of almonds. or the entire pump system. So if it's irrigating a bunch of different varieties of crops off of one pump, you can go based off of that. It's going to tell you, you know, how many events you had for a custom date, how many acre feet, how many hours you ran. We're working on the flushing side of things, but it can also tell you, you know, in percentages what you're hitting. So of the irrigation events, 99% were executed. The 0.9% is just, you know, it says it like missed 5 seconds, but it's very minimal. Next thing we can do is track it for an entire season. So like I was saying, we can look at the monthly accumulated volume, look at the acre feet for this entire growing season, export it into an Excel report, and you're going to get all of your data right on your laptop right there. And now we'll kind of go into more for SWIIM.
Greetings, everyone. Daryl, appreciate it. It's an honor to be here and to talk a little bit about the connection that we've made here between WiseConn and SWIIM and how we're in a position to grab that base irrigation and flow data that WiseConn's already capturing as a part of their overall service package, add elements of input, data input, and then create what we call a fully balanced water budget. So we'll start with the video and then dive into the slides.
Your farm has two possible outcomes. Give it 10 years, you'll be toiling over a dusty, desolate wasteland. Or, if you're resourceful, you'll be living in the land of milk and honey, green pastures and all. Now, I'm not saying it's all doom and gloom, but for some of you it could be. And I think you know who you are. You're the ones getting left behind. The ones that don't have the time and resources to research and invest in every new technology. At SWIIM, we know your long-term success boils down to how efficiently you use your water supply. And we're not just talking about reading your decades-old flow meter. We're talking 21st century technological, geological, meteorological, and whatever other logical advancements you can think of. All that power right at your fingertips, customized to include exactly the things that will bring value to your operation and protect your family's legacy's most precious resource. Let us make sure your farm stands the test of time, even through water scarcity and other uncertainties life throws at us. SWIIM will keep your water usage accountable up to the tiniest drop.
All right, so how do we do all of this? I'll start with a quote that was shared with me about 2 years ago by Dave Puglia, who's now the CEO of Western Growers Association. We were down in Bakersfield speaking to a couple of growers about using SWIIM, and we had lunch, and he made a comment to me. He said, an argument over water is really an argument over data. And so I asked Dave, I said, Dave, what do you mean by that? And he said, the argument around surface, groundwater supplies, lack of availability, cutbacks, all come down to one thing, and that's data. And if you have that data and it's accurate and it's auditable, you're probably going to be all right. Conversely, if you don't have it, then you've got problems. And that was kind of the key point takeaway that I took from his comment. So what SWIIM is, it's a crop water budget accounting system. So we do basically the same thing that an accounting firm would do for your financial records. Matter of fact, our reports look eerily similar to a financial record that you might get from your bank or your investment account. We're tracking flow and we're tracking dollars and cents against that flow as two primary inputs. If you think about how an accountant does things, they're going to look at all of your cash inflows, income, and then they're going to look at your cash outflows and they're going to balance that bank account. So in water business, we're only dealing with water at that point. So a good way to think about it. We provide that data, delivery and consumption meshed together by field. At the end of the season, we audit those reports the same way your CPA would audit data. Our data scientists assure accuracy as well. And then when that data is complete, we produce effectively an irrigation efficiency percentage. That's called a consumptive use fraction. And that's actually something that's tracked throughout the season and gives you a strong baseline and benchmark against your irrigation efficiency. So to solve something like WiseConn, for example, you're looking to conserve water or increase yield, or maybe both. How do you know where you're starting? How do you know where you are mid-season? And how do you know where you are at the end of the season to start that whole new season? And that's one of the things that SWIIM answers. The system was co-developed with the help of USDA over about, we say 5 years on this slide, but it was actually more like 5.5 years. A couple of patents, 3 to be exact, and one of them USDA helped us with and is actually a co-inventor. As I mentioned, Western Growers endorses us. They have a strategic partnership with us. We have 2 C-level folk from Western Growers that sit on our team and help guide the mission. We're the only company I'm aware of that actually accounts for water and provides this financial, or the statement that's equivalent to a financial statement around your water use. It's accurate, it's auditable, it's automated, and it's trusted. So what is a water balance? Well, it's keeping track of how much water is entering and leaving each of your fields during the course of the season. We don't use sample data. So a lot of folks will use examples of data or samples of information to reach conclusions or estimates based off those samples. SWIIM uses real-time field-wide data that we survey each day, and we're effectively balancing your water checkbook every day automatically. It's very similar to balancing your checkbook. It's a good way to think about it. So why would you want to do a water balance? Well, the first thing right out the gate our clients tell us is it provides a multi-dimensional look at your application and consumption meshed together. It provides a measurement of best irrigation practices, allows you to flag over and under irrigation conditions much more effectively because you're looking at both sides of the proverbial bank account. Helps determine when to irrigate, so you can get that data and go back into WiseConn's platform and make adjustments real time throughout the season. Some of our growers before using SWIIM would maybe try it mid-season, they'd make a major adjustment maybe at the end of the season. This is something that's happening each and every week throughout the season. So you don't have to try to Monday morning quarterback it at the end of the season. We're doing monitoring and reporting. With the client's permission, we provide those reports directly to the state if required for river diversions or whatnot. And so that takes that out of the hands of the grower who are growers. They want to grow. They don't want to manage their water as best as they can. They have to some degree, but they want to get as much of that off their plate as possible. Improved yields, reducing water, and again, benchmarking, and what we call SWIIM certification, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. The inputs to a water balance, they include rainfall, irrigation deliveries, crop-specific evapotranspiration, which is what USDA helped us with. So this isn't just a reference ET that we're then trying to bring to your crop and then trying to estimate based off of that. This is crop-specific, field-specific data. So that's why we need your field size, and we map that on a GIS layer. And then, of course, the satellite goes over on average 8 days, maybe every 16 days, depending on cloud cover, and gets an image, and then we use that to compare with the rest of the data sets we're gathering. Also, understanding planting or budding date and then knowing what the harvest date is gives us that bookend, if you will, to manage the crop water budget. SWIIM certification is another benefit. We launched this in June. We have growers that are growing produce. I'll use my little visual there in my office. Yes, it is a fake orange because they kept rotting every time I would bring a new one in my office. But you'll see the certification stamp. So growers are putting this on their packaging. They're putting it on the product itself. As long as they're doing a full water balance and certifying their sustainability, we allow them to use it in their marketing pieces. They use it to negotiate better placement in the store. If they're a commodity crop grower, they're using it for better end buyer pricing, because then those buyers are going and promoting the fact that their source supply chain is water efficient. So it's a benefit. It's a good one. It's proving out significantly more beneficial, to be quite frank, than we even had imagined. We thought it would be a nice add-on. Growers are really leveraging this, especially in today's world, to get better placement within their ecosystem. Alas, accounting for ag water is complex. That's been a big hurdle for many folk. Some growers have surface, some have groundwater, some have one, some have neither, of course, as we know, unfortunately. But for those that have a source of water, it kind of goes into this pool of available water. In most cases, then it gets diverted to each farm and then each field. Then you have to worry about how much is applied and consumed. And every place there's a question mark on here, SWIIM fills it in for you each and every day, and gives you good analytical data to base your decision making off of. It all starts with monitoring, accounting, and reporting. And the equation is pretty simple. Water in minus water consumed equals either a surplus or a deficit, but getting there can be challenging. So the system, again, was patented by the USDA. We use it for reporting to the state with permission from the grower. It's supported through a couple of layers of data. So we're getting infield data from, in this case, from WiseConn's equipment. We're getting regional weather data and then satellite data, and that's all meshed together to get us to some pretty amazing level of detail, but still something that's readable and understandable by our clients. It's field level. So each of these fields in this visual are mapped. So we know the water coming on. We pull that data straight from WiseConn for seamless API integration. We then use regional weather data. If you have your own weather station, you can use it, but of course SWIIM has its own weather station network, and we also use CMIS data to estimate what the crop should be consuming roughly every 15 seconds. Then that darn satellite flies over roughly every 8 to 16 days, gives us a snapshot, and both the weather and the satellite data is meshed together to give us a consumptive use value for the field. If you're looking at it in just a simple graph, we're gathering the pump and gate data here from WiseConn in this case, and then we have weather and satellite data meshed together to give us the consumption side. We have your field and crop data in the system, which gives us those bookends and tells us what the crop curve should be. And of course, we use USDA crop production data to normalize and validate what should be happening in your field. That data is then available to you at your level and to the district or state if you so choose. Good way to think about this is the SWIIM Umbrella. You have the SWIIM platform sitting on top of this equipment. And so we sit there, we interact seamlessly with what's happening. We don't tie in and screw up any of the automation that WiseConn has in place. We're just grabbing that data and using it to, think of it as adding a pro series of tools to your tool set. So all of us have bought a basic tool set of some sort in our life. Maybe it was an ag and maybe it wasn't. Maybe it's software, hardware, equipment, house warranty. I mean, it could be anything. And you get the standard service, which gives you some level of information. So you get some level of that flow data through WiseConn, the core data. But then you have an option for a pro service or a pro add-on that really dives in. And many companies offer pro services in many industries. That's a good way to think about this. I'm going to play a quick little video clip here. Bryce Jones, who heads regional sales throughout California and does channel relationships for us, or manages channel relationships. He was recently out at the WiseConn test plot where SWIIM is monitoring, and he has an interesting take on how WiseConn's data seamlessly integrates and then into SWIIM's data adds a new layer, multi-dimensional layer to the data stream. So Bryce, go ahead and take it away.
So we're out here today with at Fresno State Farms, where they're growing olives here. We're partnered up with WiseConn, where we're going to be doing water balance data. They'll be collecting the flow. What we're doing is tying that into a water balance, where we take a look at all the irrigation, effective precipitation, what the plant is using, and also deep percolation. That way we know where all the water is going, and we can create a water balance with that that's running on a daily basis and consolidate on a weekly and monthly basis, and a year-end report.
That's perfect, Bryce. So, all of that extra stuff that Bryce was talking about, effective precipitation, how much water the crop's actually using, how much of that is deep perk, that's all added data that we're calculating with these reports. A couple of sample screenshots here on your screen now. Basic delivery report. Again, we provide ledger data each and every day based on volume and cost. So we attach a cost to each flow point, so you can track in near real time what you're spending. And that adds up. Many of our growers have told us, they said, when they see the volume, normally in acre feet, but then they see the cost, and that lights a light bulb up in their head, because it's in their face every day and they're looking at it. So it provides a new level of data, and we're capturing that normally at a field level in most cases. That all comes down to the water balance report, which is available once a week. Normally on Mondays, it's emailed to the client automatically. Starting in November, the grower will be able to determine what iteration they receive these reports on. But it's a detailed water budget. And I'll point you to this screen here, it looks just like a bank account. Of course, it's talking about depth, volume of water in each of the subcategories, and then dollar values, but gives you a very good idea of your water in and water out. Effective rainfall is pulled out as a portion. You can see total versus effective rainfall. And then, of course, the assumed consumed fraction, which is, in this case, irrigation efficiency. How much water was used by the crop? About 83% in this case. Growers will look at this each and every week, try to improve on it. At the end of the season, they get a final audited report. So this note will turn from provisional to a final audited report. And then that will show them the consumptive use fraction for the whole season. And then that normally becomes the baseline for the next season to target. Similar to a Fitbit. We've been told that by clients, you know, the ones that are really trying to get their weight under control or they're into health, wearing Fitbits. And those that are wearing Fitbits are getting that data stream throughout the day. It allows them to make better decisions about trying to get their weight under control. So that's another good analogy I've heard. Detailed soil water accounting, each event, and how effective that irrigation was. So if you're irrigating on a day where there's precipitation, we're going to give you an idea of what the soil profile was. And if that irrigation exceeded what the plant needed, it becomes ineffective irrigation or rainfall, if you will. And that's the delta between the effective and total rainfall here. So a couple of high-level things to think about. Another popular graph from the water balance report is this cumulative water balance. We call it the daily time step water balance. So each day, you got a couple of data points here you can look at. This light green line is a target. Some growers will set it within the system, some won't. Those that do irrigate toward that target. And you can see here the blue line is deliveries of 1 or 2 or 5 fields, whatever the subject of the water balance is. Consumption by green. So, of course, overall, minus agronomic reasons not to do that. They're trying to bring those two lines closer together, generally speaking. And then surface or subsurface and surface outflows. In some cases, we measure the surface return flows. In some cases, it's lumped together, depending on the application. Some growers will add precipitation. Some growers will add targets, like this one. But the goal is to see it graphically and make changes throughout the season. All of this data is also available on a customizable dashboard. So it's easily scaled. It's easy to set specifically the kind of data you're wanting to see on your field. I'm going to show you some samples of that right after this little video clip that shows you a little bit about our quality assurance and data science process. Because with SWIIM, we don't just give you the data and say, hey, we hope it's right, because some of this is being used for legal compliance. We give you the data, but then we're tracking it throughout the season. Part of that is through our partnership with WiseConn to make sure the equipment's calibrated. Some of that is an internal process. Bryce is going to speak a little bit more about that now.
QA/QC, that stands for quality assurance and quality control. Quality assurance ensures that techniques and processes are implemented correctly and consistently, and that includes standard operating procedures, maintenance, and installation checks. Quality control is an ongoing process that focuses on identifying problems in the data, including field checks by our technicians, review of delivery and water balance reports, and a thorough data review of all collected data. Part of the standardization process with SWIIM, prior to the data being collected, is that we standardize the installation, we standardize the maintenance schedule, we standardize the battery monitoring, which is most times done remotely. We also do installation checks to ensure that everything is functioning correctly after we leave the field. Some of the field checks are completed using flow trackers, in-field flow meter checks, and hand checks at gates or other structures with monitored equipment. Data collected can be collected by the hour or more frequently in some cases, and regularly analyzed by SWIIM's data science team to ensure accuracy and consistency. By following regular QA/QC, it allows us for corrections to automatically collected data when necessary.
There you go. So the data that you see on your dashboard, you can see not only where we're at in the QA/QC process, but the most recent date. And so, you know, this particular screenshot shows you a couple of the different widgets that growers will add, water balance. They might add a widget to give them an idea of irrigation efficiency, flow data. Some of this doesn't look dissimilar to the data that we would be pulling from WiseConn's platform. But what we're doing is it's coming in, we're checking it. And so you can see this green line is eventually going to get all the way to the end of the season. We always lag the actual season, of course, because we're looking at it in the arrears. And as we find issues, we earmark it, we fix it, or we call the grower to make sure that we're not missing something. Last QA/QC data is also shown here. When a widget goes into what we call alarm mode, it'll turn red just like what you see here, and a text, email, or phone call will be sent. So if a grower sets a limit, it could be a pump operation limit, like this one is being, this demo one shows 400 to 1200 GPM. When it's on, if it's not running between those ranges, it sends an alarm out. You can set alarms on cumulative consumption or delivery. So if you're trying to stay within a water budget, you're going to know maybe a couple of weeks or a month or two into the irrigation cycle or season if you're off budget. So those kind of alarms can be set, and they are regularly. And then, of course, we're checking the data as we go along. Water balance widget, this is the same data you saw in that earlier picture that comes off the water balance report. This one's dynamic, though. You can set the ranges. You can go on and look into the details on days, get exact numbers. The blue line, again, is delivery. It's consumption. And then, of course, it's surface and subsurface irrigation for each and every field. Other widgets can come off of this. We have some growers that use a planned available water widget for their application. Anything that comes off of water or weather can be integrated. We could integrate soil moisture data. We've done that in some cases. And some growers will use that as a benchmark against our water balance tool. So we're asked that on occasion, and that's certainly something that can be used. This widget will be available starting in November, and it's the irrigation efficiency on a weekly basis. So you can track it. So that same number I showed you earlier in the presentation will also be available on the dashboard here in November. So our consumption data, I talked a little bit about. We don't just use weather as a method to estimate field level consumption, and we don't just use satellite. We use both, and it's one of our patent processes on how we integrate those two components together. So we're estimating consumption each and every day, throughout the day, of course, but that doesn't take things into account like crop stress and other components that could affect really what's happening in the field. So we have that satellite that flies over roughly every 8 days. Bad weather might be every 16 days. Takes a snapshot of your field. The system goes back about 8 days, or the last time we have an image, and adjusts the curve. So a good way to think about it is every plant or every crop has projected ET curve, right? We know what that is because we know what the plant is, the variety, we know the start and end date. Our systems know what it should be doing, all else being equal. So each and every day, as the plant is consuming water against deliveries, remember we have that data set too that we're looking at and comparing. Roughly every 8 days, we're getting that snapshot as well of what's happening, and it might be a little higher or lower of the curve of where the weather data states it should, and then we go back automatically through a routine we wrote to the last picture or to the last snapshot and adjust the data stream. So that's how, using those two components, we've been able to get some pretty accurate consumption data from clients from all over the Western U.S. This picture really resonated with me when I was trying to understand that weather and consumption component. In this graph here, this is a field where the blue data is weather acquired ET, basically. So we're using weather data to estimate ET here. Look at this. You go down the gray area, that's using satellite data. So if we were only using weather data to estimate, or estimates through other mechanisms, that wouldn't necessarily represent the field, what's happening throughout the field, right? Because you have all kinds of spatial variation on especially a large operation. You're not going to have an accurate view of consumption, but if you're using satellite and weather and you're molding that together, you're getting a much better picture of what's happening. Satellite's a downside using that all in by itself because it's only happening every, if you're lucky, 8 days and maybe every 16 days. So there's a lot that can happen in between those windows. So if you're not trying to kind of polish the curve, maybe for lack of a better way to put it, you're going to miss a lot of data in between those 8-day periods. That same data we're using in the water balance is also available visually. The most common layers that we see would be the advanced ET layer, the NDVI layer for crop stress. Growers will go to this, look at their graphs, and then go look visually on a day when a snapshot came in and compare that against what he or she knows should be happening in the field. So it's just another way to display the data. It's not analytical, or as analytical, it's a little more subjective, but we're using that same data stream in a visual band as well. Okay, as we wrap up here, we will have time for questions, but what we like to do is answer some of the most common questions we get asked, because almost every webinar or meeting we have, we get asked pretty much the same questions. So we're going to save you some trouble and answer the most common questions that we hear. And then Daryl, if we have time, I think we will, we can have some additional question Q&A time at the end. So let's go ahead and listen to Bryce here, wrap it up with asking and answering the most common questions.
What's the difference between just measuring flow and SWIIM? Flow tells you irrigation amounts. SWIIM tells you irrigation, precipitation, crop water use, deep percolation, and runoff. SWIIM is the only system available which provides all this data fully audited and in an easy to read report. How is this going to bring value to my operation? SWIIM gives you the tools to improve crop production and optimize water use. Furthermore, SWIIM's reports serve as audited third-party verification of water use and efficiency. This protects our clients from any arguments or regulatory constraints which lack the field-specific water data that SWIIM provides. What crops can I monitor using SWIIM? SWIIM can be used with a wide variety of crop types: permanent crops, row crops, and perennial crops. Whatever your specific crop is, SWIIM has a solution. What irrigation system do I need to use with SWIIM? SWIIM can be used on all types of irrigation system, including flood, furrow, sprinkler, and drip. No matter how old or new the system is in place, SWIIM has the tools necessary to collect the accurate data. Do I need to have an automated irrigation system to use SWIIM? It's not necessary to have an automated irrigation system to use SWIIM. SWIIM can add or recommend the equipment required for remote monitoring regardless of the current irrigation system. If you do have an existing automated irrigation system, SWIIM can tie into this, collect data without any additional equipment cost. Do I need a weather station to use SWIIM? If you have a weather station on site, SWIIM can tie into it. If not, SWIIM can access available weather stations, and in many cases, an existing SWIIM weather station and/or a public weather station. It is always beneficial to have a weather station on site. SWIIM always makes sure there's a minimum of 2 sources of weather data tied to each field we monitor to ensure accurate information. This, combined with satellite imagery analysis, allows us to provide an accurate, field-specific calculation of crop water demand.
And there you have it. That didn't answer your question. We're happy to answer additional questions. As we wrap up this section, resources are available on our website. And so brochures, downloads, and videos, they're all under resources. If you go to our homepage, download brochure, we'll bring up a couple of brochures, including one that talks specifically about SWIIM and WiseConn integration. So if you want more information there, grab that. Then the video gallery, great place to go. And then the middle area here, when you get to the video gallery, dashboard reports. All of those reports that I gave you some samples on, we narrate sections and show you exactly what each of the elements of the report or dashboard widget will provide for. Lots of resources on the website. If you have questions, you can reach out to either WiseConn or to SWIIM. I don't think there's a place on our website you can't click and get someone, fortunately or unfortunately. Feel free to reach out. We're super interested in chatting with you about taking that base data that you've been relying on and using and putting it on steroids. If you want to go to the testimonial page, you'll see growers. Again, if you know them or if you want to contact them, we'll get you their contact information. These are growers that have been not using SWIIM and then using it for like 2 or 3 years. And they've told us, they said, we can't imagine in today's day and time with the unavailability of water, generally speaking, whether it's surface, ground, drought, PSA issues, whatever the case may be, there's not an argument for them to have, or that for any grower not to have to know exactly where their water is going. And our growers tell us, they said, we can't imagine going back to not having this level of analytics. So with that, I'll pass it back to you, Daryl, again. the attention. I appreciate the time, and I'll go ahead and pass it back.
Perfect.
Okay. We have a couple of questions. Question and answer. The first question is, how do you determine the cost of water? Is that region specific? Yes, the answer is it's region. Not only is it region specific, but it's also by water source specific. So, give you an example. We have a grower that has 2 or 3 wells on their field, and then they have a district turnout. Every one of those water sources could have a different price associated. In some cases, both of those wells, right? If you have a deep well, that's going to cost you more in electricity than the more shallow well. So what we normally do is on district turnouts, we ask the grower to estimate per unit of water what they're paying in assessments to the district. That's normally the baseline. On groundwater wells, they'll normally include county assessments, electricity, any other overage fees. And then that's keyed into the system. And then, of course, as we're tracking the water, it's like a speedometer. We're just clicking it as we go. So that's how we end up handling the price of water. We can get more granular in the water costs. So some growers, as an example, if they're in an area where they're trying to get a cost rebate or a tax rebate or a payment from the district, they might actually put the value of the water that they can't, or the value of the water savings versus the cost of the water, if that makes sense. So they can see how much they're losing in savings if they don't save more water. It can be done on the delivery of the consumption side. So I hope that answers your question. Second question here. Hello, I'm curious about a slideshow how SWIIM works. You mentioned surface water, district, and groundwater in the equation. So what does district pumped here means? Okay, so what we mean, district water is generally surface water when I'm talking about district water being serviced by an irrigation district. Depends on the region, though. I know we have callers on here outside of California. Sometimes they're called ditch companies, some special use districts. If it's a surface water supply, we normally refer to it as district. And we know that's kind of a high level, quick blanket catch of surface water, but that's normally what we mean. Groundwater, of course, is groundwater, regardless of who manages it. So you have groundwater management agencies in many of the regions we're in. So that's the difference in the slide deck. Hope that answers your question. Next question, another question, what is ETC and ETA? Great question. Someone was reading that graph very closely. ETC is crop ET and ETA is actual ET. I have a whole different slide deck for another time that goes into detail on that, but we'll keep it real simple. So crop level ET is estimates based off the crop. Actual ET is something like from satellite where you're measuring it. So that's the difference between that. When we use ETA, which is the satellite data, when that comes over, the more images we can give us more snapshots in between effectively crop ETC that we're generating in between that time. So we do believe, and our technical team could probably dive into that more detail, but the more images we have, the more we like it because we can do comparisons against that. So I hope that answers the question. Let's see here. Sounds like you're using Landsat as your main source of satellite. What specific satellite data is derived from SWIIM? We use both Landsat satellites. That's correct. I think most people use that. Energy balance equation. I think it's metric based. But keep in mind, SWIIM is data and hardware agnostic. We're actually working on a second data provider right now that we've been partnering with for quite some time. And they will be up and online probably at the end of this year. So we're not tied to one source. We have our what we call advanced level ET because we have to have some level of ET to serve our clients, but we're not tied to using that level or that particular source. Okay, so another question. I get my water from the Imperial Water Authority on a strict budget. Why wouldn't I use all the water in the budget? If I'm efficient and save water, do I pay less? Briefly, so I believe you're talking about Imperial Irrigation District, which we do have activity where we monitor fields down there. That district offers an incentive program for payments against saved consumption. Excuse me, not delivered water, but consumed water. So if you can show that you have reduced your consumption against a baseline that the district says is acceptable for your crop, and you do so without stressing the crop, then you're paid a reduction. So that's a perfect case study, detailed case study on why SWIIM is useful down there. I hope that answers your question. There's another question. It is better if you could explain the water balance. Still questions, I think, on the water balance. I'm going to take a shot at that one here because I think we've got about 5 minutes left.
Okay, I mean, what I understood of the question was maybe trying to determine what's the difference between ground and surface and district and pumped and all that different stuff. I think that might be the question.
Okay, good one. I'll give my shot here, and if I don't answer it, reach out whoever's asking, and we're happy to. Yeah, we can spend more time. Most growers have two sources or two potential sources of water. Not all have both. They're getting surface water from their irrigation district, which comes in through rainfall through the mountains, through a river diversion in most cases, and is either pumped or delivered open channel. Then you have groundwater, which is coming from aquifers way underneath the ground. So some growers have both of those sources within their water budget. So think about them as two sources of income, if you want to think about it as a bank. So that's all going into their system. There's a third component, of course, precipitation. Some of our regions have very little, if any. Some have more. But those are the three sources. Those are your water ins to the system. And so with surface water, in most cases, in groundwater, the cost can change on how deep the well is, a whole bunch of what county it's in, et cetera, et cetera. But those are the two buckets of potential water. Not all growers have access to groundwater. Take the question prior, Imperial, they're all surface water, Colorado River water. Some regions in Central California, some in Colorado. I mean, we're in different states, have surface or ground, one or both. And some growers have one and they're concerned that that's their only one. Really attractive. So I hope that helps.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I think to add to that, I mean, one example that we've got out in Oakdale is a guy, gets water from the canal. He has to open it from OID. And he also in the winter starts the deep well. He doesn't use the regular booster anymore. He uses the deep well and kicks that on and irrigates from there. So that's kind of one example of having hands in two different pots. But so thank you, Kevin, for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Daryl, I appreciate the opportunity. We're super excited about the partnership. And again, thanks for everyone. Have a great weekend.